Have you ever heard that it is good parenting to break the will of the children, to make sure that they do not rebel and they do not exercise that strong will, that is something that needs to be stomped out and broken and just got rid of so that they could submit to the authority of parents and other authorities in their life? If you've heard this, I would submit to you that this is not something that we would do well to do to these children. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you some reasons why we should not break the will of children, contrary to popular belief, and I have some biblical reasons why. So before you stone me, let me tell you some reasons that I believe that even you may accept and realize, hey, I've never considered that before. But first, my name is Enoch Leffingwell, and here at the Army of Youth, we are passionate about helping young people to identify their unique talents and to dedicate them to the Lord's service. If that's something that interests you, I encourage you to subscribe and follow us on social media so you can get more messages just like this one. So we're looking at the will of the children. Why should we not? Why is it a bad, terrible idea to break the will of the children? And part of that is because it is through the will that we can resist temptation. It's through the will that we surrender and choose Christ. And there's several reasons why not. I believe that it is good for children to have a strong will, but the solution is to teach them to surrender their strong will at the foot of the cross and to surrender their will to their parents out of respect and love and trust, not out of sheer brute force and ruling with an iron fist that if you don't obey, then you're going to force them to. This actually drives children away and it doesn't bring them closer. There's a fine balance, and I'm going to share with you, by God's grace, seek to share some principles in this way here. Now, as I share these principles, this thing can apply as well to any form of leadership. If you have others who are under your sphere of influence, like you do not want to force them to be obeying, you want to help them to choose to follow as a leader. And same thing as parents or children or influences. Whenever we are able to influence others, all these principles are applied. So one of the reasons why is number one is if children have a weak will, they will be weak. And the will is the choice. It's the decision. It's the governing power in the nature of man. God has made us all free moral agents. And when you could look just at Jesus and how God works, does God force your will to obey him? Not at all. It is Satan that seeks to compel the conscience of men. It is Satan that seeks to control the minds of individuals, thinking individuals, and cause them to force us to obey his will. And we see that's a tactic of Satan. It is not a tactic of heaven. Heaven operates with free will. In Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 19, the word of God says, I have laid before you blessing and cursing, life and death. Choose life that thou and thy seed may live. So God gives us choice, because really to obey him, God wants love, because God is love. And if God forced us to obey him, God forced us to love him, then it wouldn't really be much love. Now, would it? True love has to be out of voluntary service, a decision from the heart to decide to love and obey God. And in like manner for children, or those who are seeking to influence, or people on our team, or those who are joining our organization, whatever it is, we want to enlist them and their decision, enlist their choice, help people to make right decisions for their reasons, not because of brute force and raw authority and the position that we hold that allows us to force people. Because you could get people to do something for a time, but as soon as that parent or as soon as that authoritative figure is gone, then they're going to rebel very quickly. And this is what drives people away. And if you want to make sure that your children don't trust you, they don't love you, and they don't want to be around you, try to rule them with an iron fist and control their decision, break their will, and you'll be sure to drive your children out from among you. And they may obey you for a time, and they may look disciplined, they may look like outwardly their decisions are being good, but in their heart they are far from you. It's not what we want. We want their heart and their decision, and I'm telling you, there's a way to get them both. So if their will is weakened, what that happens is they are under the habit of letting other people to decide for them. They're constantly waiting for the approval of others and constantly waiting to have other people to think for them, to decide for them. And what this does is it weakens their own individuality, that they're not able to exercise that strength of character, that strength of decision. So what happens is when they go out into the world and they're around bad influences, they will be easily influenced by their peers for good or for evil. I remember when I was in high school, I had a very close friend who was trying to get me to smoke cigarettes, and he was like one of the most persuasive people I have ever met. This individual is one of the most intelligent teenagers I've ever met. I've never seen someone like that. And he was speaking to me, and he was so meticulous with his pressure, and he's like, hey, it's like everybody's doing this just a little bit, it's okay. And he's going through all those different peer pressure things. I'm like, no, I don't want to. You see, the truth is, when I was 7 years old, I smoked my first cigarette, and I didn't want to. I coughed, and I'm like, this is disgusting. I don't know why people do that. And I felt the burn, and I'm like, okay, it's like, that's not for me. And now I'm probably like 15 at the time, and he's really trying to get me to smoke these cigarettes. And I'm like, that causes cancer, that it like damages your health, it makes you stink. It's like, I don't think that is something that interests me at all. But he was so persuasive. It was intense. I've never still probably like been in such a like peer pressure environment as that, where that individual was very persuasive. But I had a strong will, and it doesn't matter what he would say or do or try to influence me. I was not choosing to smoke cigarettes regardless what he says. But it's because of the strength of my will that I did not do that. And so what happens is, if we break the will of the children, they don't have that protection to do right. They don't have that ability. We think we're trying to prevent them from doing wrong, but think about the consequences on the other side. Then they don't have the strength to do good also when they are tempted with evil. So that is one thing. And another challenge that comes when having a weak will or weak decisions is, a lot of times, especially daughters, they go out from among the family, and as soon as they're not over the authoritative parents, then they get into unhealthy relationships. A lot of times they find controlling boyfriends, or they unhealthy situations where relationships that are sometimes abusive in nature, and often that can be traced back to, among other things, of breaking the will and seeking to be controlled, or seeking for, like, the children don't know how to function or make decisions of their own, and they're constantly trying to please someone else and have other people make the decisions for them. And so if we're not willing to make our decisions, then the devil will surely make those for us, because God is not going to force our will. He gives us options, and he asks, and gives us his word and teaches us principles, and then he says choose. But Satan's like, hey, I'll choose for you. I don't want to give you options. I want to keep your mind in scarcity, so you think by fear there's only one option, and that's what you're going to do. So this leads to unhealthy relationships in the future. And I remember there was a time where I realized that I wanted to work for God, and I was so grateful for what God has done in my life, and I was just so excited. I'm like, I want to work for God. I don't exactly know what that's going to look like, but I want to choose him. And I decided I'm going to work for God, but everyone around me was like, no, you're going to throw away your life. My peers were like, what? You're going to be a bum on the side of the street? My teacher even stopped class in high school for like 10 minutes to go on a rant how important it is that I would like choose a different path. And I'm like, man, everyone is against me in my decision right now, and they're not being supportive. But I was enduring because I knew my will was surrendered to God, and the strength of my decision was firm, and they weren't going to push me away. My sister took me out to eat, and she pled with me. She's like, Enoch, you're going to be a bum on the side of the street. You're going to throw away your life. Don't do that. Like, ministry can't support you, and God doesn't take care of his people. And she wasn't saying that exactly, but it's like, look, I know that if God's my employer, he will supply all of my needs. And I can tell you, friends, after being in full-time ministry for almost 9 years now, I can say that God has supplied all of my needs. And I have loved this privilege of being in full-time ministry and the experiences I've been able to gain. It's one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life to dedicate my life to Christ's service, and I want to help every young person to make a decision for Christ. But it took a lot of willpower to endure such unsupportive environments and unsupportive people who were trying to pull me away from what God was calling my life and for me to do. So if we train our children to have a broken will, and where they have no will, then they need that compelling power or influence or authority. They're looking for someone to dictate their decision. But the truth is, we are the only people that are going to fully live with the responsibilities, the consequences, the outcomes of our decisions. And what I believe is far better and than trying to prevent the children from making mistakes, prevent the team members who we are leading from making mistakes, is to allow them to make mistakes. Allow them to suffer the consequences. Like as us, I know often, I've been leading teams for almost a decade, and there's a lot of times I see different people are making a decision and it's going to be bad. I'm like, oh, I really wanted to step in and save them from the consequences, but I've done that. It creates way more stress on me, puts more responsibility on me, and then they don't learn the lesson. I save them and they don't even appreciate the lesson I saved them from. I went through the pain and I don't want them to go through the pain, so I try to save them from it, but it doesn't work because they won't learn and they'll continue to make the same mistake until they learn. So what I found works so much better, and isn't this what God does for us? He gives us options. He allows us to make decisions, and there are natural consequences with those decisions. Now, in that moment, this is oftentimes where people say, well, you didn't listen to my advice, you didn't listen to me, you were being rebellious, and then they get upset and they scold the children, or they get upset with the person who they're mentoring or they're training, and they're saying like, oh, you did this wrong, and they say some mean things, and it really drives them away. But instead, I believe what is much better than trying to have them shield them from the consequences is to support them patiently through the consequences. And what does that look like? That means being there, not if, but when they make a mistake. Let them give them counsel, give them advice. This is what's going to happen if you make that decision, but the decision is yours. This is what I would recommend, but you're going to do what you're going to do, and I'm going to be here, whether you listen or not. I'm going to be here to support you. And so when they make the mistake, when they go off and do something that they know they shouldn't have, or they didn't know, but they did it anyways, and when they are dealing with the consequences, a lot of time, that is where the greatest leadership opportunities are, the greatest molding, the greatest character and lessons, training. It's not about, I told you so. It's that, oh, what can we learn from this experience? Like, I'm here for you. I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to condemn you. What can we learn? What can we do better next time? And what would you do differently? Knowing what you know now and seeing how things worked out, what would you do differently? How can we avoid this from happening again? Those questions are so much more powerful, so much more helpful than just telling them, when you create an environment where it's like, you didn't listen to me because you didn't obey my voice, and now you've got this, I'm going to push you away. I believe that's where we draw near. That's where we get down with them and say, hey, what can we learn? I'm here to support you. I don't agree with the decision you made, but you have these consequences. How can we avoid this in the future? I'm not trying to take away the consequence, but trying to use this as a lesson, because I believe that these failures only appear as failures when we learn from them. We can turn our losses into lessons. Psalms 119 verse 71, it says, it was good for me that I've been afflicted. Why? That I might learn thy statutes. So when we turn our trials into lessons, and we can triumph. And if we're there through that experience, we can help them, strengthen their will, and help them to make better decisions next time. This is what I believe is a better alternative to help them. Because the truth is, we want people who can make strong decisions. I believe that the greatest want of the world is the want of men. Men who will not be bought or sold. Men who in their inmost soul are true and honest. Men who do not fear to call sin by its right name. Men whose conscience is as true to duty as the needle to the pole. Men who will stand for the right, though the heavens fall. But this character, this isn't the result of accident. This isn't due to a special gift of God's providence. A noble character is the result of self-discipline, of subjection of the lower to the higher nature. It is the surrender of self for the service of love to God and to man. This is how we can supply the greatest want of the world. But when we constantly try to shield people from making these mistakes, we're actually taking away the men. We are making the leaders more absent, we're taking away their opportunities to grow, because it is experience that is going to help people to bear greater responsibilities and to be trusted with bigger things. And my favorite verse in all the Bible is in Luke 16:10. It tells us how we can teach them how to make decisions, how we can start cultivating the skill of making decisions and exercising our will and strengthening it, but strengthening it in the right direction. And it says this: he that is faithful in that which is least will be faithful also in much. But he that is unjust in that which is least will be unjust also in much. So the secret of strengthening the decisions, helping those in our sphere of influence, be they children, be they team members, be they whoever, then the way that we do it is by giving them little decisions that they could make. And practice saying the word. Say it with me. You decide. You decide. A lot of times when people are brought with different decisions, they come all the time, and I tell my leaders that just practice telling your team, you decide. You decide, and I support your decision, and let them make these decisions and cultivate this ability to think for their own and to decide, and reinforce that you trust them, that they're not constantly afraid that, oh no, if I make a mistake, I'm gonna make my father upset, I'm gonna make my leader upset. It's just like, oh no, I'm not gonna live up to their expectation. Maybe they won't love me, or maybe they'll see me as a failure, maybe they won't trust me. But create that trust. Say, hey, I trust you, I'm here for you, you're the right person for the job, I know you've got this, you decide, and I support your decision. And as they start making smaller decisions, it'll help them to make greater decisions. Because really, the more decisions they can make, the more responsibility they can take, the more help that they could be for you, the more alleviating they could be, the greater service they could be for the world. Because in the end, leaders make decisions. And if you want those in your sphere of influence to be an influence in this world for Christ, for good, they have to be strong decision makers. They have to not have a weak will, but have a strong will, a will that is surrendered by choice at the foot of the cross. And say, like as Jesus, do you think Jesus had a weak will or a strong will? He had a very strong will, but even Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane, he said, Father, if there be any other way, please take this cup from me, but nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done. Christ took the strength of his will and surrendered it at the will of God, because Jesus knew the safest and the happiest place on earth is in the will of God, and he chose to surrender this to God. I don't believe that having a strong will causes rebellion, but actually if we take away the option to choose right or wrong and we try to force our will upon the will of others, this will drive people away, it will make them weaker to withstand temptation, and it will make it harder for them to be a power for good or an influence for Jesus. But if you want to have strong leaders, if you want to have people who are surrendered to Jesus, making decisions that are influencing those around them, then I encourage you, remove this myth. Let go of this idea that we must break the will of the children and start seeking rather to guide and direct and support the will of the children. And if you want a tool that can help you to make decisions, to help you to clarify your options and to understand what is the will of God for your life and to get better clarity on God's calling in your life, then what we've done is we put together this special book. It's called Live Your Calling Daily Accountbook. And in this account book, we'll give you questions that you can ask yourself every day that will help you to make better decisions, especially those decisions that make the biggest difference. It'll help you to prioritize your focus in life. It will help you to understand more of God's calling in your life, to see where are the weaknesses of your character and how you can strengthen those for Christ. If you desire to live your calling and to strengthen your will and not have a weak will that's often surrendered to everyone around you and have other people making decisions for you, if you want to make decisions that are in harmony with heaven, I encourage you to pick up a copy of the Live Your Calling Daily Accountbook. I would love to send one of these to you. All you have to do is go to the website, thearmyofyouth.com/accountbook, and you can order one today. That's again, thearmyofyouth.com/accountbook, and you can pick up your copy today. And if you thought that this was a blessing, then I encourage you to subscribe and follow us on social, because there's more messages just like this. Let me know in the comments below, what is it that stood out to you the most in this message? I would love to hear from you. And remember, God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called.